Hello there, everybody. Oh, God, do I love to see your little faces. My name is Adam Clyro. We're going to do a music list now, because I said, give me more music lists. And they were like, well, get yourself some more music lists. And I was like, all right, then I will. And I wasn't really sure how to start this, but I've kind of got an elaborate sort of analogy for what I'm trying to say here. So just, bear with me. You love Alex Turner for the line, love's not only blind, but deaf. Because that's a great line, isn't it? It was in the first Arctic Monkeys album somewhere. It's a great little line from a great song, and you think Alex Turner's brilliant for saying that. But the point I want to make is, yeah, that's great, but it was Geoffrey Chaucer, the Middle England poet from like the 1300s or something, who said, love is blind. So if you like that line, you should probably like Geoffrey Chaucer more. Now don't get me wrong, he didn't do anything as good as Betty Look Good on the Dance Floor, but and I guess that's kind of a pained metaphor for all of this, but what I'm trying to say is the most commercial, the most successful version of something is not necessarily what is the best, not what you should probably love the most. And I just want to get something out of the way here, right? I'm not trying to be snooty about anything here. Everything I'm saying that you shouldn't love as much as the other thing is great, and you can like that as much as you want. I'm just saying, if you like that, you should really like this as well. Kind of covered my bases there. So with that horrendously bad introduction out of the way, my name is Adam Clyro, and these are 10 artists and bands you love, but for the wrong album. Number 10, Good Charlotte. Now, you like Good Charlotte for the young and the hopeless. Why wouldn't you? But you should like them for their self-titled debut album. Yeah, Good Charlotte were a bit of an enigma back in the day. I remember when I was first introduced to them, it was via a poster in a girl's bedroom. Oi, oi, am I right, lads? And you had these really hard-looking dudes on those really cool little pedal bikes, and they had all the guy liner on, and the spiky hair, and the spiky everything, and they just looked really goth and really scary. And then I heard the first song, and it was Girls and Boys, and I was like, wait, what? And that's the thing, Young and the Hopeless is a really, really good album. It's bright, it's poppy, it's fun, it's got lovely chord progressions, it's even whispery, got small elements of Britpop in there somewhere. It's got banger after banger after banger. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous is great, Girls and Boys is great. There's loads of class songs in it, but it's just, that's kind of what Good Charlotte were trying to do to be a big band. What they were trying to do to be a good band, though, was their self-titled debut album. And the reason it's so good is that, yes, it has got these giant, joyous bubblegum choruses, sure, but it's also got just the meat of the songs is a little bit more, there's a little bit more oomph behind everything. It's this really smart illustration of what it means to be broke and to be bored and to be young in America, and it sounds exactly like what it is. It's an album written by two brothers who had nothing to cling to but their guitars and their dreams. Number 9, Fleetwood Mac. Now you and everybody else on the planet loves them for Rumours, of course you do, but you should like them for Tusk. And yes, just before I start, of course, Rumours is one of the greatest albums ever written. It was probably the best album Fleetwood Mac ever did, but not the best Fleetwood Mac album, if that makes sense. Like, there is this essence of Fleetwood Mac, a quintessential thing that makes Fleetwood Mac Fleetwood Mac. There's more of that in Tusk than there is in Rumours, even if Rumours is slightly better. And if I'm making it sound like Tusk was some kind of like intimate personal passion project that saw the band go back to its roots, absolutely not. It was the most expensive album ever recorded at one stage in history. It went well over $1 million, which for that time period was absurd. It was ridiculous. They did this custom-built studio purely to make something that sounded nothing like its 1977 predecessor. They wanted to go, yes, this is great, but in the bin and into the sun it goes, and onwards we charge to make something you've never heard before. And the end result is a jumbled mess. It's not a conventional album, it's just like snapshots of how the band were feeling at any given moment stretched across like 2 CDs. Like, they just discovered post-punk in the middle of recording it, so out of nowhere you just start dropping some post-punk in. It's just, I'm not making it sound particularly good here, but trust me, it's just wonderful. Number 8, Weezer. Yes, of course, you love them for the Blue Album, but everybody needs to wake up to Pinkerton. There are very few albums in the world that have had opinions change on them quite as drastically as Pinkerton. Like, Weezer brought out the Blue Album, everyone was like, wow, these guys are really, really good. And then they brought out Pinkerton, and everyone was like, wow, these guys absolutely suck. Like, the critical acclaim for this album was non-existent. It bombed. And then partially through a little bit of revisionism, partially just because tastes change over time, it's kind of revered now as this cult classic of an album. It does really build on what the Blue Album did before, while really adding some of the things that would make Weezer great in their later careers. Like, Make Believe is revered as a great album now, but you never would have had that unless they'd done Pinkerton. It's got this like rougher around the edges, visceral quality to it. It actually sounds more like a first album than it does a second album, and lyrically speaking, it's some of the best work the band ever did. I think probably overall it's probably the best album they ever did, and it deserves to not be seen as this like weird Weezer ugly duckling of an album. It deserves to be seen as this garage rock swan that it actually is. God, that was elaborate. Number 7, Biffy Clyro. You love them for Only Revolutions, I know you do, but you really need to love them for Puzzle instead. Right, to our British audience out there, do you remember Matt Cardle? I had to look that one up. He was the winner of the X Factor one year. He had like a city hat and he played acoustic guitar, and then when he won, Simon Cowell was like, why don't we make you credible with indie fans? So got him to do a cover of a Biffy Clyro song. They took Many of Horror, they changed the name to When We Collide. For some reason, it shot to the top of the charts, and with it, it dragged Biffy Clyro into the mainstream. And yes, Simon Cowell, he did make a whole lot of money doing that, and he just then stuffed it all into his face and wound up looking like something that ended up on the cutting room floor from the goddamn Cats movie. But Biffy Clyro enjoyed some major success off the back of it. They went from being low-key, underground, everyone's favourite Scottish rockers to one of the biggest bands in the world. As a result, Only Revolutions, the album the song was taken from, was absolutely huge. Everybody was listening to it. It became something that everybody had to have in their house, right, in between, like, Definitely Maybe and whatever the hell that thing by the Fratellis was. But the thing is, Puzzle, which came out before it, was much better. Like, just can you imagine all the people who watched Matt Cardle on the X Factor and thought, ooh, I should get that Biffy Clyro album, if they'd gone and got Puzzle instead, putting it in, and the first song they're greeted with is Living as a Problem Because Everybody Dies, which is just like all over the place. They would have thought it was broken and thrown it out the window, the goddamn normies. Saturday Superhouse, Semi-Mental, Folding Stars, Machines is the best album the band ever put out, in my opinion, and if people only know them because of Only Revolutions, they need to goddamn slap their head, wake up and go and listen to Puzzle now. Now. Number 6, Blossoms. Yeah, I don't really want to focus on a particular album here because Blossoms as they exist today are brilliant and you can love them well within their own right, but they felt so much more important, so much more necessary, so much more urgent when they were putting out this wonderful, psychedelic, almost post-Britpop goodness. Just at the time, there were so many of these, like, identical indie light groups masquerading as rock stars, and then Blossoms came along with their fuzzed-up guitars and their grooves and their riffs, and you just thought, you know what it is? You could have whatever you want in this world, lads. You could take it by storm. But then there just came this point where they put away the psych and they picked up a synth instead, and they became these, like, Radio X mainstays, and they were on every single festival stage, and everybody low-key liked them, and I don't begrudge them that one bit because they're now 10 times more successful than they ever would have been doing things I like, but I just wish people would go back and revisit them at this time because they were just not better, but just different and more important to me. Well, hang on, right, this is probably the best way I can describe it, right? Blossom's early work sounds and feels like Stranger Things Season 1, and everything they've done since sounds like Stranger Things Season 3. Number 5, the Gaslight Anthem. Now, the Gaslight Anthem were a bit of a weird band because they came along at a very strange time. There was all these landfill indie bands who dominated the airwaves, and just before them was The Strokes and subsequently every band who thought they could be The Strokes. But then the Gaslight Anthem came along and just went, look, everybody, do you not remember how good Bruce Springsteen was? And they sort of floated around for a little while before finally getting their act together and releasing the 59 Sound, which is the album that everybody now knows them for. But if you just go back just like a little tiny little bit further and you get Sink or Swim, their debut effort, which was just not better, but correct. Like, people love the Gaslight Anthem for doing this soulful punk rock with just a bit of a punch to it, but just before they did that, it was less of a punch and more nuanced, I guess. It was still one of the most interesting things out there, but it just felt slightly more complex, more layered. And yeah, alright, this next bit's a bit of a cliche, but the second album was just, you know, all the things you love about the band, with all the edges smoothed round and a far more complete product, whereas Sink or Swim had all those rough edges. It had years of touring behind it. It had inconsistencies and just things they hadn't been able to finalize yet, and thus it is, again, not a better album, but just a purer distillation of the Gaslight Anthem. Number 4, Bring Me the Horizon. Now, I am in no way going to criticize That's the Spirit, but honest to God, if you've not heard Suicide Season and you're a Bring Me the Horizon fan, you'd need to listen to Suicide Season. Now, I personally love the fact that a band like Bring Me the Horizon can get onto Radio 1 these days. It shows how much power us emo kids ended up wielding in our adult lives, but honestly, before they got there, when they were just a group of lads from Sheffield with just this really weird throbbing hard-on for metalcore and fringes like this big, they put out something special. Suicide Season is, despite the name, surprisingly sophisticated in how it works. Like, yes, it is heavy as because of course it is, they're just some young lads doing their second album, but it's weirdly melodic too in parts. Like, you can hum most of this album. That's how good it is. And the thing is, Bring Me the Horizon have always been a lot more forward-thinking than they ever get given credit for. It's no accident that they're huge mainstream stars now. They planned that from the very beginning. But if you look at all the bands they've allegedly influenced, if you go and ask them what's the quintessential Bring Me the Horizon album, they say it's Suicide Season, because there's so much of the band, so much of their future planning laid out in this album. It's just great. Number 3, MUSE. Yeah, you and everybody else heard about them from the goddamn Twilight soundtrack, but you need to listen to Absolution. You see, you thought I was going to say Origin of Symmetry there, didn't you? Because it's the one plugging babies off, and we've all heard Newborn a couple of times, and Bliss is there, and oh, they're out there, and they've got magic mushrooms, and they're playing things with llama bones, and that's the edgy, cool choice. But nah, honest to God, Absolution is simultaneously a soundtrack to the apocalypse and one of the most accomplished British albums of all time. Like, the theme of the album is literally the end of the world, and from the very first song, Apocalypse Please, it does sound like you're listening to the end of the goddamn world. The way they use just these huge piano riffs, and just the sound of the drums, which was apparently recorded in giant swimming pools with basic drums about as wide as this studio, it sounds like that all the way through. They put in some of the best hard rock songs British music's produced in ages, Hysteria as one example, but then they also put in entire symphonies and just play entire Rachmaninoff pieces in the middle of rock songs. It's just, I don't even know how to describe this album to you. Like, if you went, oh, I like Supermassive Black Hole because they played baseball that time with all the sexy vampires, like, genuinely, stick your head in a vat of acid, then go listen to this album. And even from, like, a critical standpoint, like, MUSE were a bit of an oddity in British music. They were like these skinny kids who had a couple of bangers, but were a bit too out there and sounded too much like Radiohead, and then they just got in the studio, recorded this, got sensible haircuts, headlined Glastonbury, and then, to this day, still sell out entire arenas across the world, mostly on the back of how good this album is, because, whisper it, it's not been great since, Black Holes and Revelations aside. Number 2, Green Day. Guarantee you, or at least someone you know, had that giant Dookie poster in your room at some point, but, and hear me out on this, Foxborough Hot Tubs, Stop, Drop and Roll. Do you know what it is? I was tempted to say you should love them for American Idiot, because there's never been a better example in history of a band growing their musical sound over every single album before finally hitting a critical best work. Like, American Idiot kind of gets a bit of a bad rep because it was a more mainstream approach to them, but when you sit and listen to it start to finish, it's just such an accomplishment. And I was really tempted to say you need to get over yourselves and accept that American Idiot is their best album, but FBT, SDR might also pinch it. And if you're sitting there going, I actually have no idea what you're talking about here, Adam, that's because it's kind of a side project, this. It's not a Green Day album, it's a Green Day sort of offshoot band. Foxborough Hot Tubs, which I never say correct first time, they only released one album, and that is Stop, Drop and Roll. And if they're ever worried that they can't just find the magic again that brought them albums like Dookie and Nimrod, and they can, because they put this out and it was amazing. It's just uninhibited, and it's fun, and it's Green Day at their absolute classic best, and you just tell they're just messing around in a studio and inadvertently coming up with absolute gems in the process. The best way I can describe it, right, is if you took Green Day from now, being as accomplished as they are, then put them back in the era where they wrote Dookie, where they're just like smelly and sitting on sofas and haven't really got anything to do, and then got them to start making a Green Day album, this is what you get. It's just the best of both worlds. Number 1, Bruce Springsteen. With apologies to all of my friends and all of my family, and indeed anybody with ears, yes, I know you love Springsteen for Born in the USA, but just hear me out here. Nebraska? So here's the story, right? Springsteen got disillusioned with the writing process, and he basically sat down in his own house with a 4-track and recorded all of his demos so he could then take them to the E Street Band and they could flesh them out properly. This was, at the time, Nebraska. And eventually got in the studio, they tried to do all these other things, and then there was a load of complications, and in the end he went, you know what? These demos are actually fine, and he just released them to virtually no fanfare whatsoever. And in the process of doing that, he ended up giving the world one of the most genuinely sincere, thoughtful, and beautiful folk rock albums ever made. What he recorded in his house that day was never supposed to be released to the public. It never had any ulterior motives. It never had other people meddling with it. It was just pure and simple what he wanted to say. It is just unpretentious masterpiece after unpretentious masterpiece with not a single drop of studio or label or outside interference anywhere in it. It is as good as Born in the USA? Of course it's not. It's one of the best albums ever written, but it is what you should love him for, because when you boil everything back about Springsteen, the gimmicks, all of that, you get Nebraska. And it's just, I can't say enough good things about it. Go treat yourself. So there you have it. Those are 10 artists slash bands who you love for a particular album, but in my opinion, you should love for a different album. Let me know what you made of it all in the comments below, as well as any suggestions you've got. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I have, of course, been Adam Cleary, and I will see you soon, I guess. Goodbye.